Our Locked On Hawks postcast, part of Locked On Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawks postcast. It is the best Hawks post talk. Oh, goodness gracious.
Too much excitement. Too much excitement. Like, my girl, it's not every day that we're like on a 4-game winning streak, for crying out loud.
For crying out loud. Wait, not just a 4-game winning streak, but a 4-game winning streak that took us 5 quarters to get it done, but they got it done, right? So yeah, I will be honest with you. It's so funny because while you're saying that, I literally, when we were getting, actually this is as I was getting ready, kind of heading back home from the game. And of course I leave at halftime to come home and get ready for the postcast. I was literally saying to myself, like, they're tied 64-64. This is a game. And this is exactly what we were talking about when we talked about running the gauntlet. So yes, you are absolutely right. I'm welcoming you guys into an exciting edition of the Locked On Hawks postcast. And it is going to be your best Hawks talk every single day because it's this local insight and excitement you can't get anywhere else. We're right here at Locked On. I am Tenitra, Batiste, and the guy that just bailed me out of all of my excitement, but still has all the joy I have, is the one and only DeShaun Tate. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The Locked On Hawks postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. DeShaun, the Hawks got their 4th win. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4th win in a row tonight. And they did it in fine fashion. It was an absolute barn burner. It was exciting, exhilarating. It was all points in between. But the most important thing is it was a win. 141-134, the final in overtime over the Warriors. We're going to talk about it in the deep dive. How exactly did they get there? How does 30 drop 60 and you get a dub? We're going to talk about it in the and one. And of course, we're not finished. They're not finished. There's one more game. So they've got to try their best to put a bow on this homestand. We'll talk about that and who got next. But first, we'll give you T's and Tay's takes on this game tonight. Now, Tate, this was some kind of game. And you said the thing that made you beam on the outside and inside was the fact that, hey, don't look now, but these Hawks are learning how to win.
No doubt. And listen, I think that I'm not sure that, I proposed this question yesterday on the first game of the back-to-back, and it's kind of like, are we undervaluing what they're doing right now? And I think that we kind of have. This is the team that you expected to see at the beginning of the season with the new coach being settled in and Dejounte being settled in and everybody being settled in and healthy and blah, 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 whatever, what have you. Looking at Jalen as being the cherry on top, not necessarily being the guy that has to lead the way. This is what we were talking about. This is the feel that we've been wanting for so long, hating that it's taking us so long to do this. But it just kind of seems like they're learning how to win games. We've seen many of these wins earlier this season that look like they could have been, identical to this one. Mm-hmm. But they weren't because they came in a 1-possession loss, maybe a 2-possession loss or something like that. Now they're learning how to finish out games, close games, how to start faster, how to, finish on an exclamation point. I think that we're that head coach Quinn Snyder's also learning how to coach the teams, learning when to take timeouts during the game and different things. So I think that they're just kind of growing as a team, and they're quieting the outside noise. Mm-hmm. Trey is maybe not paying as much attention to the stuff that's happening with All-Star. Kind of seems like he's growing, mm-hmm. The defensive aspect of him as well, because I always want to wake that up because I think that people pretty much put too much emphasis on that a lot of times. And mm-hmm. so for good reason. And so now that we see some improvement in that, then it needs to be talked about just as much, keeping the same energy. So all of the things, and they're playing together finally as a unit, being connected, the chemistry, the camaraderie, all of these things. Ultimately, they're growing as a team, and all those things equate into learning how to win.
They absolutely do. And I think those are some good points that you make, because I think about all the little things that I saw, especially in that first half. And I think that was important to see it in the first half, to be able to establish and set a tone. When I looked at Clint Capella, for example, him having his way early inside, scoring for the Hawks' first 7 points, 8 points, 5 rebounds alone in the first 5 minutes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu matchup and that duo and how they were able to battle and really, really dictate some things on the inside. But I like some of the things that I saw as well, like Dejounte Murray getting it done early and late. That was a cool thing because, you know, oftentimes we see the guy who had the hot hand or the guy who was really, really dominating in the beginning for the Hawks kind of fade out at the end of the game. And therefore said that 1 possession, 2 possession game where they clearly could have won, the pendulum could have swung their way. It just didn't previously. I saw some nice ball movement again. And, you know, for me, the definition of ball movement is not just the ball goes from 1 hand to 2 hands, 3 hands to the 4th hand, but it's rather, is there intentionality? And there was really one play that, man, just kind of did it for me. And it was kind of like right there, this give and go kind of late in the first quarter where I saw the ball move from Trey to O to Bogey, Trey back to O, who was then ready to do some damage. Now he did get fouled, albeit. But my point being, everything was with intentionality, and there was some quick, sharp communication that we saw. And yeah, I think you do talk about that, and you have to give credit to some maturity, and you have to give credit to some connectedness and some communication that we have just not seen, at least not on a consistent basis, meaning within game, quarter to quarter, and then game to game. So yeah, I love what we saw. But hey, if you wanted to know what was going to happen tonight, you should have watched the show on January 30th, because I said what I said. And on January 30th, you and I took a broad look at what this game was going to be, right? We were looking at, hey, it's a 6-game homestand, and how are the Hawks going to get to 500 on the homestand? That was our biggest thing, because we would consider that to be a win. And one of the games that I gave him was the Warriors game. I said, you know, revenge can be a beast, and they got blown out. They got embarrassed at Golden State a week ago. And I really thought that this was going to be an opportunity for them. What I liked that I saw was that it didn't necessarily come from the directions that you would have thought. Most people, it's going to be Trey shooting, you know, shot for shot. And at first, DeShaun, it was like that. In the first quarter, they were trading buckets to the point where I literally tweeted to begin the second quarter, looks like this is going to be a duel tonight. And there were moments where it was, but what I loved about this win is that it came from directions that we never could have guessed they would have come from. So, and that's what we're going to talk about in the deep dive as well. In the and one, we are definitely going to dive more into this game and tell you exactly how the Hawks got the win in overtime. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's probably Chiefs country, or what do they call it? Chiefs Kingdom, rather, and 49ers country, 49ers nation, and anybody who just likes to watch a good game, because I think that's going to be a good game. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is maybe all about scoring, the best seat on the couch, because I like to watch the game, sometimes in solitude, sometimes at a party. It depends, because I'm actually watching the game. But I also sometimes like to get to a good Super Bowl party, at least for the first half of it, and grab my favorite football snack and really kind of, some people may enjoy placing bets on the game. FanDuel might be the way you can do that in a lot of ways, and that way you end the NFL season on a high note. Not only can you bet on who win the Super Bowl, but FanDuel also has bets for Super Bowl 58, which include players who will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. So new customers, it's your day. You can join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets in your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, DeShaun, this game had some really, really encouraging things for Hawks fans. Going back to Trey, his final stat line was 35 points on 12 of 21 field goals, 7 of 11 shooting from 3 tonight to go with 6 assists and a steal. And you talked a little bit about some things that you saw in Trey's game tonight. But if you dig into that stat line, or maybe even beyond the stat line, where did you see Trey making his biggest contribution?
Excuse me. I think that it was certainly on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, listen, I was like, I don't know what to think. They're putting him on Klay Thompson, Don't forget, this is one of the best shooters that we've ever seen. We know that it's not the same Klay Thompson that we've seen, over the years and what have you. But yet still, number one, that's their problem. Number two, he's still Klay. At the end of the day, instead of, it being a 10-point performance or something along those lines, I think.
Yeah.
Instead of in 2 for something crazy, whatever the stat, maybe 10 points, 4 for 19 from the field, 2 for 13 from 3. That same player, it could easily be someone that's putting up Steph Curry type numbers because we've seen it from him before.
Yep.
So with Steph having to be drawn to that assignment, and I get it, Trey was definitely getting some help, and there was definitely some switches amongst other things. He was doing a fairly good job of holding his own and closing out on someone and getting up underneath. When you have to defend a shooter, you have to get essentially kind of like get underneath their legs, because when that jump shot is coming from the hip and we know they have quick releases and everything else, he was being as disruptive as a small guard as he possibly could be. And I think that he did a phenomenal job. So where everyone else may look at necessarily, the offensive side and what Trey does from a shooting standpoint, obviously with the assists, very cerebral player, high IQ and everything else. I want to stay on the wake up the defense train, because again, we've heard so much about this poor defense and how he can't guard anybody, and that's always overshadowed anything that he did do positive on the offensive side of the ball, that we have to wake up what he's been able to do on the defensive side of the ball as well, which I might add makes this whole all-star snub thing just that much more ridiculous.
Yeah, which is probably why he is the odds-on favorite, kind of the betting man's favorite, to be the one who will get the call up from the injury replacement of, we now know, Joel Embiid and or Julius Randle. So we'll see what actually happens there. But for me, it was taking the opportunities that a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 seasons ago, Trey would have just heaved the ball up at moments so early in the clock. But getting across the half court point and really working the clock in certain possessions, that's what I liked. That is nothing you're going to see on the stat line, but that's what I like to see, because at the end of the day, those are the little nuances that help to get the other players involved. And that's why we have been talking a lot of late about Hawks 5, 6, and 7 Hawks in double figures, 4 Hawks getting double doubles. We've been having that conversation for the last several games. And a lot of that you have to attribute to Trey, because again, he's taking quality shots, but also not just quality shots, but high IQ shots. And it makes a difference. And you look at the fact that the Hawks were in a situation where any other time Steph Curry shoots and hits 60, the Dubs don't win a dub, or don't get a dub. Probably not going to happen. But tonight it actually happened. And when you dig deep into the numbers, you kind of see that on so many levels, whether it's from field goal percentage, or whether it's from 3-point land, or just about any number that you look for. When you look down the team stat line, they look very, very similar, except the Hawks actually pulled it out in overtime. And I think it's because, as similar as the numbers look, I will say in the majority of categories, the Hawks had a slight edge as well. And I think a lot of that is where the Hawks, except points in the paint. That's probably the one place.
Yeah. That was a different level.
Yeah,
not even close.
So and I want to kind of talk about that as a two-parter, but I do believe that even in the 5th quarter, where really how the Hawks pulled away was Dejounte Murray, but we know that it was also because of some domination in the paint. But let me say, with what Dejounte Murray was able to do, he's one of those guys, and this is one of those times where don't let his stat line fool you. Don't let his stat line fool you, because you might look at his stats and you might say, oh, wow, he only scored 19 points tonight on 9 or shooting, didn't make a 3, including that 3 that could have iced the game at the end. But what he did do was he kept shooting. He had 5 rebounds. He had 7 assists, and he was able to play through foul trouble, because he literally had 3 fouls with about 3-4 minutes left in the first half. So that's why I think so much credit goes to him to be able to reset himself and kind of make sure that he had an impact, not just in the second half, but DeShaun, we know your best ability is your availability. And by him playing a smart game the second half, he was available in that overtime, that fifth quarter. So 5 going off in 5Q is how the Hawks won this game.
Yeah, I mean, when you factor in, I think where we saw some of the growth, for example, from Trey, right? He could have been the person that's trying to go shot for shot and make a point, make a statement and everything else, the way that Curry was hitting shots, trying to follow up. And while he did do that to some degree, trying to go shot for shot, he didn't do that on every possession. The risks that he did take were shots that he did make, and they were calculated risks. But some of the others was, oh, so you guys are just going to double team me. I'm going to get some of these other guys involved. As for Dejounte Murray, who had a big, first of all, he comes into this game, I think, 8th consecutive game scoring 20-plus points. He ends up with 19, which is one shy. That's perfectly fine. But again, like I mentioned on last night's postcast, when you factor in the job, I mean, listen, his job was to chase around number 30 all night. That's enough already as it is on anybody's plate. I don't care who you are. But it was a team win. Onyeka Okongwu, dare I say, 3 straight games shooting a three-pointer and making it. By the way, he did that twice on tonight. The offense that me and you have talked about and have ridiculed from time to time, expressing some of our concerns and reservations about not having the offensive skill set to be able to go with that center position. I don't know what Onyeka and Clint combined for tonight between points and rebounds, but it was enough to make me close my mouth. From that standpoint, Bogey off the bench, I mean, the whole 9. And remember, and I'm going to say this, this will be my last point. Remember, without 2 of your best defenders on this team, especially on the perimeter for a team that, is so heavily fixated on perimeter play. These are 2 of the best shooters, if not the 2 best shooters that we've ever seen as far as a duo in this game. When you don't have a Sadiq Bey at the 3 and you don't have a DeAndre Hunter really at the 3, you have to insert a Garrison Matthews. Who the hell is that? I have no clue, but I know he was in a Hawks uniform tonight, and I got to give him his flowers. For the first time, Tenitra, and please forgive me because I get a little long-winded, but I'm really excited for this team, and I've been waiting on this moment. For the first time ever, we have an opportunity to really, or the first time this year, just really feel like this run in these last 3 or 4 games have really felt like what they did during the Eastern Conference Finals. These aren't against bum teams.
No,
these
are. I was with you. Nope, I was with you.
Hear me out. Hear me out. Walk with me. Walk with me. Walk with me. Walk with me.
Okay.
These aren't just against anybody. This is against the best player in the NBA. A lot of people's GOATs. This is against arguably or inarguably one of the best scorers that we've ever seen play this game in Kevin Durant. This is also against the best shooters that we've ever seen. If you don't get a better feeling out of that, that's as close as it can get to the run you made. I don't know what would be.
Well, I don't think that. Well, see, here's the thing, though. And we got to remember, yes, these are those players, but these are also those players who are not in their prime, as in when the Hawks were on that Eastern Conference Finals run, everybody they ran into was in their prime. So I do think we have to level set there. I also think we have to level set at the fact that the Hawks didn't have a losing record when Nate McMillan took over. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, they were 500. This is still a team that's middling, and I had to look at the record just to make sure they're still 22-27. So we still want to kind of level set in that regard. And I think that when we talk about 7 or 8 or 9 games, then you can start talking about that. I thought, wasn't it like an 11-game stretch that the Hawks went on when Nate McMillan took over? Because they lost the Miami game, and then Lloyd Pierce got fired, and then they played Miami again, and then they beat them. And then they went off. And I'm pretty sure it was like 11 straight games that they won once Nate took over. And then they went on to go on that run for the Eastern Conference Finals. I just said that I was retiring, and I'm sticking by what I said. I'm retiring conversation, commentary, and comparison to the Eastern Conference Finals, because I just think that's a ship that sailed. Like, that's not the same team. This is not the same team that was here in 2019. It's a totally different team. So I just want to more look at it like, let's just call it for what it is now. Let's say this is a team that is starting to gel at the proper time. No offense to anyone who's a Bulls fan, for example, but Zach LaVine is done for the season. This is a team that's only a game and a half ahead of the Hawks. So they have an opportunity there, albeit you never want to do it on the backs of a player having to have his season end over foot surgery. But it is what it is. And that's an opportunity for the Hawks to move up. I think I kind of want to stay there in terms of where their next step is, rather than kind of starting to compare and contrast them to what was. I think that's kind of how people get so frustrated too when they see these Hawks, because they're like, and when they ran to the Eastern Conference, what the hell happened in 2019 for that? Like everything you could think of went exactly how it was supposed to go, start to finish. And again, pretty sure they strung 11 games together. And that wasn't the first time that wasn't the only time. They actually had, 5-game win streaks, 6-game win streaks throughout that run. This is the first time we're seeing a 4-game win streak this season. So I just kind of like want to temper it there, but I do want to go back to something else. And that's why I was kind of scraping and scrambling through my email, because I had a cool email stat that I can't find, or email that I got from the Hawks that I can't quite find, but I at least can give you the base of Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu combining for 39 points and 31 rebounds. That's crazy.
God.
That's absolutely crazy, especially when you think about the fact that CC had a double-double in the first half. 32nd time he's done it in his career, but only the first time he's done it this season. To me, that's two things, and we'll talk about that in the next segment as well. But the most important thing is shout out to Quinn Snyder, because Quinn Snyder early saw the mismatch, saw the advantage inside, and completely took advantage of it to the tune of about 72 points in the paint for the Hawks to 56. And that's the kind of margin that helps you to win a game in overtime. Hey, when we come back, like DeShaun said, time to tie a bow on the homestand. This episode of our Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Their easy and most exciting way to play DFS, or daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and watch the winnings roll in. Now, with the basketball season upon us, and actually we are going into the third quarter of the basketball season, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. So we've been telling you guys, Trey might be that guy, because once again, he got over that 30-point mark. Once again, it's just unbelievable what he's able to do. And there's a good chance that a guy named Travis Kelce might get over the mark of at least getting 1 touchdown, if not more, in that upcoming Super Bowl. So PrizePicks has one more thing that I think is really cool, and that's the reboot policy, where your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So whether it's football or basketball, if a player exits the game in the first half, doesn't return in the second, that player is rebooted, and they are the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So you can check them out by going to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, DeShaun, it is time for the Hawks to really put a bow on this. I mean, an unprecedented for this season, 5-game stretch of wins, if the Hawks are actually able to close it out against the Clippers Monday night. It'd be a great way to close out this homestand, and such a stretch of quality wins. How do they get it done?
I'll say this. I think that this is a team that, and Trey kind of mentioned it in the post game, that has kind of relied quite a bit on its rebounding and its defense. You just pick up where you last left off. I think those have been the, I guess, common denominators or key ingredients to what has led to wins against these Western Conference teams already. At this point, I'm kind of wishing that we could play Western Conference teams for the rest of the season at State Farm Arena. But nonetheless, I think also Dejounte Murray being aggressive, something else that Trey alluded to and mentioned. I think that, that's something he has to continue to do. I kind of hope that we don't put ourselves in position to where we have to rely on Dejounte Murray in the fourth quarter all the time for him to pull us through to a degree. I'm glad it happens the way that it's been happening.
Right.
But I definitely don't, feel like, using it. Oh, well, don't worry about it. We got Dejounte. He'll come through for us in the fourth. I don't like that idea. I'm sure they don't set it up that way and it just happens. But outside of that, I want to say something else, speak to, some of the fan base. Like the Hawks have done a good job of making sure that it's been, very loud, because on these last 3 days, we've had some really star-studded, or just, really, just really popular, or I guess athletes that have been coming into our arena, and there's been a lot of fans that's been cheering on the opposite team. But I expect for that to continue in happening, where the Hawks fan base, diehard Hawks Nation, have kind of been trying to overpower a lot of those voices and cheers and chants and different things like that. A lot of people love Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and all of these other guys, James Harden. So I look forward to hearing from everybody in red that'll be rooting on the Hawks on tomorrow.
Yeah, and I know, on Monday, right? Yeah, Monday. And I know it's difficult because it's Atlanta, it's Monday, it's traffic, it's a beast. But yeah, for them to close this out on a positive note, while I don't think you're going to see nearly as many Clippers fans, because there are not nearly as many of them, especially not outside of LA. Let's just be real about the thing. But you're not going to see as many of them as you saw Lakers fans. You're not going to see as many as you saw Warriors fans, but you'll see some. Hawks, make sure your fan base comes out and shows up bigger than they did, because tonight, when it counted, the Hawks fan base showed up bigger. In the beginning, it was a little scary. Yeah. And Steph was out here jacking up threes, and it was like, oh, this might be a long night.
Yeah.
But once the Hawks settled in, the fan base followed and stayed the course until the very end. And you're right. That's where the Hawks are getting back to something that has worked well for them for several seasons now, and that is home cooking. The Hawks have been a really good team at home. It was very, very confusing for us to see the Hawks take L's this way that they've done so far this season until recently. Now they're looking more like the team we're more accustomed to seeing, feeding off of the energy of the crowd. And maybe, DeShaun, that's because honestly, we've had to see more non-starters than we're accustomed to. So a Sadiq Bey, and when I say that, meaning you have players who've been inserted into the starting lineup, or players who were never at the top of the bench mob starting to be at the top of the bench mob and getting minutes that they weren't getting. Those kinds of players, your role players or your bench mob, your second unit, they usually feed off of a home crowd better than anybody. And so it's good to see that they're finally maybe starting to feel like the Atlanta crowd is their crowd as well. Not Bogey per se, not Onyeka Okongwu, but I'm talking about the new guys, a Garrison Matthews, a Wesley Matthews, or even now Sadiq Bey going through a full season with this Hawks team. I think that's one. And I think you already pointed out one other one, and I'll point out the third. But the second one is rebounds. When you look at the win that the Cavs got over the Clippers, the last team to beat them, that's how they beat them. They beat them on the inside, and they beat them on offensive rebounds. And they also beat them on the inside with points in the paint. That's the formula that worked tonight. That's the formula that worked against the Lakers. That'll be the formula that works against those Clippers.
On Monday. Yep. I agree with you. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Indeed. So we, of course, will be back on Monday to talk all things Hawks. And we are so looking forward and hopeful that we'll be able to talk to you guys about another quality win. We appreciate you for stopping by the Locked On Hawks postcast. And remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Brolin. Have a good rest of the weekend. You should. The Hawks won. Should be a great weekend for you. We'll see you Monday night.